Hello you guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Bella if you're new here, and in today's video I thought we could go through some of my favorite books for fall. I know it is only August, so if this is, tragically early for you, please feel free to save this video and come back to it in a couple months when it feels more appropriate. But I personally love to dive into the fall spirit a little bit early, especially being somebody that lives in Florida where it is just so hot forever. And one thing that really helps me get into the spooky fall vibe is books, because unfortunately I do not have the weather to help me get into that mood. I will be completely honest with you guys and say I did actually already fully record this video once, a solid 35-minute video with no sound, because I was trying a new microphone and she cut out. So this is round 2, and hopefully this actually means it'll be a better video for you guys because it's all fresh on my mind, and these are all going to be book recommendations. So these are either books I have already read the entire series of, or I have read a couple of the books in the series and I'm excited to continue reading them this time of year. Either way, these are all Halloween-y, spooky, fall cozy fantasy type reads, and these all are kind of fall into like my favorite type of genre for this time of year. I'm not gonna really go into my like wintry Christmas reads quite yet. Now a lot of these could flex into that time of year again because it's just cozy and comforting, but these are a little bit more tailored to that fall spooky season vibe, because I just love that so much. I was always a like Twitch's Halloween Town kid, so these are kind of trying to reinvigorate that energy into adulthood. So I have my little laptop set up here with all of my books so that way I do not get sidetracked. But the first book I want to dive into and recommend are my YA recommendations, and these are all going to be fantasy. So the first one is Heartless Hunter by Kristen Cicerelli, I think is how you say her name. I will obviously be putting photos here of all of the books that I am recommending in this video. I do have some of them physically, but some of them I don't. So instead of trying to like, oh, which one, that vibe, I'm just going to put a photo of each of the books here. So again, yes, the first one, Heartless Hunter by Kristen Cicerelli, and this is a fantasy romance where Rune Winters, a secret witch and vigilante known as the Crimson Moth, courts her enemy, the ruthless witch hunter Gideon Sharp, in a dangerous game of cat and mouse. I'm also just going to be reading a little blurb of what each of these are about, and then kind of going into discussing a little bit more. Some of these I read quite a while ago, so they're not super fresh in my head, and I want to make sure I'm giving you a really clear description. But yes, this book I read for book club last year, and it was so great that we ended up picking up the second one and reading that as well. This is a duology. Again, the first one is called Rebel Witch, and the the first one is called Heartless Hunter, and the second one is called Rebel Witch. I also think this has been published under the name The Crimson Moth as well in some places. So if you can't find Heartless Hunter, look for The Crimson Moth. But yeah, just look for the author, look for the second one being Rebel Witch, and that should help you find this. But this is such a interesting fantasy romance because, again, it is YA, but it definitely is a little darker than your typical YA. I think it really dives into some interesting themes. So I would recommend looking up trigger warnings, especially since it's just YA. I think if this was adult, I would feel less inclined to say that, but because I think it does explore some adult themes, I think it would be beneficial to look up the trigger warnings, especially if you are a younger reader. But overall, I definitely think that this is a fantastic series. I think I gave both of these at least over a 4-star, like very, very good. And the magic system in this book is so creative. It definitely leaves you wanting more. The plot twist at the end of the first one, fantastic. The forced proximity in the second one, even better. I also love that in this book they have a really true reason to be enemies, or to be rivals, because they are a witch and a witch hunter. So there's really the conflict makes sense, versus like in some books, like the next one I'm going to talk about, which is The Cruel Prince. The rivalry comes because one's a fae and one's a human, which fine, but like, I mean, just prejudice, you know, like you don't have to hate them. Like there's no war going on, there's no external motivators, like it literally is just being prejudiced. So in The Heartless Hunter, the witch hunter makes a lot of sense because they are at war with each other, so it's understandable. Diving right into the one I kind of gave a spoiler for, Cruel Prince, which is one of my all-time favorite YA fantasies ever. I have this conveniently on display up here. It is my bedazzled copy of The Cruel Prince, and I read this book probably 2 years ago now and binged all 3 of them so quickly. In this book we follow human Jude Dwart, who is raised in the dangerous fairy realm of Elfhame after her parents' death. She ends up battling constant bullying from Prince Carden as well as his fae friends. She ends up seeking power and survival. She becomes a spy, navigating deadly court politics. And then there is a bit of a twist at the end where we go into our second book. And there's quite a bit of forced proximity in that one. There's quite a bit of enemies to lovers. There's quite a bit of yearning. This is a very slow burn book. I think if you're looking for super romancy romance, this might not be for you, but if you're really interested in a book that has heavy plot, heavy court politics, you know, some higher fantasy elements, I think you would love this. The author of this is Holly Black, who also wrote the Spiderwick Chronicles, which I loved as a kid. So if that was something that you enjoyed as well, I think you would absolutely devour this. The world is so whimsical and, you know, like spirited and spunky and just like so interesting. I think if you love a fantasy that feels like what you think of when you think of like Harry Potter or like the Lord of the Rings, like one of those really like there's creatures and goblins and like weird things going on, then you would absolutely love this book. And so I had to throw it in there for that. I also just think this is such a good book for Halloween specifically. It really gives like Halloween Town grown up essentially. So yes, highly recommend that one. Moving into my adult recommendations, and essentially same genre but adult. The first one is From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I have not finished this entire series. I have read the first 2, but I am very excited to continue because the first 2 were both like Hall of Fame reads for me. I ended up putting this down after reading the first 2 because one, it's very long, which can be a bit overwhelming, and also because I did just feel like I was reading it at the wrong time of year. It is a very atmospheric fantasy. It is a very it's very Throne of Glass-esque, like that energy. So if you've read that, then that's kind of what you can expect going into this in terms of vibe. But in this book we follow Poppy, who is an isolated young woman known as the Maiden, who is destined to undergo the Ascension ritual. However, her life changes when she meets Hawk, a striking royal guard. She starts to uncover Dark Kingdom secrets, falls in love, and discovers some things are not always as they seem, which definitely does change her a lot as a character because she is very based in the religion of this world and based in purity. Again, she's called the Maiden, as you can imagine. So once she uncovers some of the darker elements of the world around her, it really shatters her belief of everything, which is just really interesting to read about, especially you know, having some religious like history myself, and seeing how religion can really influence the way people behave. I think if that's something that fascinates you, this is definitely a good read for that. But again, it also is just a fantastic fantasy/fantasy romance. I think this is one of those fantasy romances that like genuinely has a substantial plot. So if you're not as interested in the romance, the fantasy is really well rooted out, at least to the point I've read, and I'm very excited to continue reading this. I know this is a huge series with like spin-off worlds and there's like so much to get into, so I don't know how far I'll get, but I definitely think I'll pick up the 3rd and 4th and like, you know, just see what happens as I keep reading. I have heard that there are some people who think this series has fallen off or maybe just It does not continue being as good as the first couple, so, you know, we'll have to see if that's the case, but at least for right now, I highly recommend at least the first two. So I'm excited to dive back in. Okay, along that adult fantasy romance, I kind of want to dive into a little bit of an interesting one, and that is Bride, also Mate by Ali Hazelwood. So these are two independent, like interconnected standalone books, and they are a paranormal romance. And Bride is the first one. Technically, you could read them in either order, but if you read Mate, you're gonna get some pretty big spoilers for Bride. So I would definitely recommend reading Bride first and then Mate, but do your thing. But anyway, so in Bride, we follow vampire outcast Misery Lark as she enters an arranged marriage with Lo Moreland, who is the alpha of the Southwest Werewolf Pack, to secure a political alliance. With the marriage, she kind of goes into it more agreeable because her friend Serena has gone missing, and she may or may not have found a clue that potentially ties Lo to her friend Serena. So she ends up being very agreeable to this marriage with the hope of getting into werewolf territory and uncovering some information, some secrets, etc. The rival, like, lovers in this is so good. Forced proximity is fantastic. I love an arranged marriage when it's done right, and I feel like this one is. And if you enjoy Bride, you will enjoy Mate 10 times more, in my opinion. I think both are fantastic, but Bride I thought was wonderful. Mate I thought was fantastic. And they both are just so fun and silly, and the magic world is so interesting. Like, the vampires in this world have purple blood and the werewolves have green blood. So there's like a lot of just like interesting kind of like paranormal elements. Of course, it's a paranormal romance, but if you really love like classic vampire werewolf story, this one's for you. And yeah, I highly recommend. I think I gave the first one like a 4.5 and the second one like a 5. These are fantastic. I might even reread these this year because they're just that good. They also are very spicy, I will say, like incredibly spicy. The first one less so than the second one, but the second one is very spicy. And there are some interesting spice elements that have to do with werewolf anatomy, if you will. So I would recommend maybe looking that up if that's something that you're like, huh? What do you mean? Maybe just do a little research into that before you pick them up. But if that doesn't freak you out too much, highly recommend. Okay, the next couple books I want to recommend are all by the same author, but it's two separate duologies by the same author, and that is The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig and One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. These are both fantastic duologies. The Night and the Moth has the second book coming out on September 1st called The Knave and the Moon. I do think I talked about this a little bit in my last video, but it's just so good I had to throw it in again. And this is a gothic fantasy romance following Sybil, who is also known as Six, who is a shrouded orphan and diviner at Ailing Cathedral. After a young king's bleak fortune is read, her fellow diviners mysteriously vanish, and she must team up with a knight named Roderick or Rory to uncover the truth about their religious order and the gods that they serve. So again, kind of going into themes of religion. If you're interested in religion, corrupt religion, how religion affects people, I think this would be a really good one for you. Similar themes like to From Blood and Ash with like the maiden, that kind of vibe. The diviners are supposed to be these like shrouded otherworldly beings, but this also has some fun whimsical elements to it. We have gargoyles that walk around and talk, which is really interesting, but the worlds that Rachel Gillig is able to create are so gothic and dark and mysterious, and like you feel like you're like reading them through like a haze of mist, in the best possible way. I think if you want a book that fully submerges you into like the feeling of like Prisoner of Azkaban by like the Harry Potter book, this is it. Like if you watch that movie and you're like, it's feeling like that like dark mystery, misty, mysterious vibe, these two books are for you, because it feels just like that. And the next one is, like I said, One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. And the second one in this I have not read as well, so I'm looking to finish these duologies this fall. Is what is it? I think it's Two Twisted Crowns is the second one. Yes, Two Twisted Crowns is the sequel. But in this book, we follow Elsa Spindle as she hides an ancient protective spirit called the Nightmare in her mind. To cure her mist-shrouded kingdom of Blunder from dark magic, she teams up with the king's nephew, Raven Yu, to collect 12 magical Providence cards before time runs out. So another thing I love about Rachel Gillig's writing is her magic systems are so interesting and something that I have never read anywhere else. So in this world, we have a mist surrounding a town, and the magic that we use kind of in this world are based from these Providence cards, which you can kind of think of as like playing cards, but they each hold a certain power. So, and they each have a certain rarity. So for example, the 12 card, there's 12 of them, so they're not as rare as the 2 card, which there's only 2 of them, so they're incredibly rare. And then the more that you use them, the more the cards are able to corrupt you, because all magic has a price. So for example, there is a card that will give its user extreme beauty, but as you use it more and more and more, you become more cold and vain. So you may have the outward beauty you've always wanted, but it will just fully erode who you are as a person. So there definitely is an element of using them wisely and thinking before you use them, all of those kinds of things. So I definitely highly recommend these if you love a really atmospheric, you want to be sucked in, you're like, I'm really struggling to get into the spooky spirit, pick these up, because I think they will immediately transport you to another world. Okay, kind of going into a little bit of a darker fantasy theme. These next two are kind of a combo of like a dark romance / fantasy. They definitely are not as dark as like a full-blown dark romance, but they definitely give you some of those feelings. So if you're a dark romance reader who is looking to get into fantasy potentially, I think these next two recommendations will be for you. The first one is City of Gods and Monsters by Kayla Edwards, which is an urban fantasy romance novel set in Angelthine, a sprawling metropolis where humans live at the bottom of the food chain among vampires, werewolves, witches, and demons. A human woman named Lauren is targeted by a supernatural bounty hunter. Oh my goodness. And her friend is kidnapped in her place. She reluctantly teams up with Darren Castle, the feared leader of the top bounty hunting circle known as the Seven Devils, to save her friend and uncover a dark citywide conspiracy. So this one kind of gives mob romance, because the bounty hunters are kind of like mobsters in a way, like mafia, which is really fun if you enjoy a dark mafia romance. We have a lot of morally gray. We have a lot of action scenes. This is a very action heavy book. If you enjoyed Crescent City by Sarah J Maas, I think you would enjoy this as well. I have read the first book in this series. I believe it's a trilogy, and I am excited to pick up the next two. I read the first one a bit ago, actually pretty close to when I finished Crescent City, and I think that's why I didn't end up picking the next two up, because it felt like I was reading a lot of repetitive stuff. But the mystery elements in this, the plot twist at the end, fantastic. The romance is great. I think I may have already said this, but it has a good amount of forced proximity. And again, like I said, if you are a dark romance girly looking to get into a little bit of fantasy, I think you would really enjoy this. On that same note, we have Phantasma by Kaylee Smith. This one is a little bit more fantasy, like traditionally, because it is not an urban fantasy. And this is kind of a darker gothic fantasy romance, and we're following Ophelia Grimm, who is a young New Orleans necromancer. When her mother dies, leaving a massive debt, Ophelia's sister Genevieve, her little sister, enters Phantasma, which is a lethal supernatural haunted house competition offering a single wish to the winner. So Ophelia ends up following Genevieve and entering Phantasma in order to save her younger sister. And the reason Genevieve joins is because she feels like she's, you know, always been the youngest. She's never really contributed in the same way her older sister has. So she's looking to do something nice for her family, which of course Ophelia as the big sister can't have. So she just traipses on in there after her. But my favorite things about this book is the New Orleans vibe. We have definitely kind of a dark Southern Gothic voodoo energy that I absolutely love. If you enjoyed the show Originals, the Vampire Diaries spinoff, kind of the New Orleans setting, I think you would love this. I think we also have a really fun MMC. He's very trickstery, he's mysterious, but the romance, the banter is really, really good. We also have a good amount of trials, so if you enjoy a like trials-based fantasy story, I think this would be a really good one for you. And again, these aren't as dark as like a dark romance, but they definitely kind of give you some of those darker elements if that is something that you enjoy. Okay, and then finally, I'm gonna go into actual dark romance. Now, I will preface this by saying I am not huge into dark romance. I do need my dark romance to be on the morally gray side of dark versus morally black side of dark. I also am very particular about them, which I think most people tend to be. I'm definitely more of a fantasy reader, but these are a couple of dark romance books that I would love to recommend if you are kind of a Scream queen girly, if you watch the OG Drew Barrymore Scream and you thought the Scream himself was quite attractive. I think these would be the books for you. These would be the ones you would want to pick up. So the first one is Leave Me Behind by K.M. Moranova, but really all of the Dark Forces books by K.M. Moranova, I think Leave Me Behind is the one that to me feels the most like thrillery, which I think is great for the dark romance vibe. But honestly, all of the books in this world I think would really check that box for you. So these are all dark military romances, and Leave Me Behind specifically follows Nell Gallows, the sole survivor of an elite squad named Riot. She's reassigned to a ruthless special ops team, Malleum, which blames her previous squad for a deadly mission failure. Nell discovers that her strict superior officer Bradshaw, known as Bones, is the stranger from a recent one-night stand. So we have a little bit of history. We also have some really strong resentment. I do think Bones, aka Bradshaw, is dark. You know, he definitely is like morally dark gray. He's a little screwed up. Yeah, so just keep that in mind. Maybe look up trigger warnings, but overall I think this is really, really great if you liked like the Hunger Games vibe, for example, but like wanted it to be darker and have like more intense romance. I think that's a decent way to describe this, but anyway, I think this is really fun. Again, it definitely goes into like that thriller vibe if that's something that you're into, and I think as long as you look up trigger warnings, it's really not as dark as some of the dark romances that I've heard. I don't even think it's nearly as dark as a dark romance I recently DNF'd, Insatiable, which I know a lot of people love. I don't even think it's nearly as dark as that, so look up trigger warnings, but in general, I don't think it's super, like it's too dark. And finally, the last book I want to recommend, again, in that dark romance genre, is The Predator by Runix. So this is a dark mafia romance, and the first book in the Dark Verse series. I've read this one and I've read the second one in this series, and I think both of those are the ones that follow Tristan and Marana, which is what this one is about. And this is yes, okay, so it follows Tristan Kane, who is a lethal and enigmatic mob enforcer, and Marana Vitalio, who is a brilliant computer genius from a rival family, as they clash, uncover a past mystery, and face a larger threat. So this follows Marana as she is tracking down a code that she wrote that has the potential to really do some damage to any mafia family, and somebody stole it from her. So she goes to hunt it down. She thinks it was Tristan and ends up, it was not him, but they end up working together because, again, this could hurt any mafia family. So they kind of have a vested interest in each other to find it, destroy it, figure out who stole it, if it's been used, etc. But throughout this, we do kind of start to notice Tristan has a bit of an intense hatred for Marana, and it's a little deeper than just you're a rival mafia daughter. And so there's a bit of mystery there. There's a bit of mystery. Why does he hate her so much? Does he know her from a previous life? What's going on? And that element of it is super fun. I think the mystery of that is so intriguing and something that the reasoning behind why he hates her, which you do find out in the first book, is not something I would have guessed, to be honest. I think the plot twist is pretty good. I will say, I think that this one is, I mean, honestly, I think both these dark romances can be a little bit cringy because, you know, dark romance tends to be, in my personal opinion, a bit cringy. I think the reasoning behind that is because I don't, like I said, typically like to read a like morally black character. And I think in order to make somebody morally gray, a lot of times the reasoning why they're evil or why they hate somebody has to almost not fully make sense. So that way you can kind of track it back and make them likable. I think you have to be able to understand the character in order to make them favorable in some way. So I think that is really why sometimes it can feel a little cringy and you can kind of be like, that doesn't make any sense. But I do think these are really fun. Again, just kind of like watching a thriller slasher horror movie, and I don't think it necessarily needs to make sense because it's just a good old fun time. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed these recommendations. If there are any that you have read and also recommend or enjoy, please comment down below. If you end up reading any of these and like them, please also comment down below. I love to hear when people read books that I recommend or even just books that I've read and we can chat about it. If you enjoy this content, please consider liking and also subscribing because I really, really do appreciate it. I also just appreciate all of you for being here, and I will see you next week with a new video. Thank you so much.